So let's talk about tempo. This is an important component of your workouts. Inside the app, you'll have prescribed reps, you have a rest period. For intensity, it might say specific weight or to build. And if we have a specific tempo for you, you'll see that denoted right in the same area where you see the rest of the reps for an exercise. So what is tempo? So tempo simply is the speed at which you perform an exercise. All right, so it's how fast or how slow you're going when you're performing an exercise. And to dive into this a little bit, the first thing we're going to do is break up any given exercise, right? So there are a few phases involved in an exercise, and we will take the squat for our first example. So from the squat, the eccentric phase of the movement could also be known as the lowering phase, right? So this is the part where the muscles are stretching. So in a squat, it is the lowering phase. That's eccentric, right? Some people might call that a negative. There is the change of direction. So in the squat, that would be at the bottom. So you have gone through the eccentric phase. You're now down at the bottom where you're going to change direction. And then the concentric phase is when you stand up. That's the contraction of the muscle. So the muscles stretch and lengthen on the way down. Then you change directions and the muscles contract as you stand up and the muscles in your legs fire. So understanding that there's those three phases, right? For a bench press, it might be a lowering phase here. Then I have the change of direction phase at the bottom, and then the concentric phase or the positive phase where I'm contracting and pressing the weight up. So we can manipulate our speed or our tempo across those phases to do a few different things. So the numbers you see here are a reflection of what you might see programmed for an exercise for tempo. All right, so these three numbers indicate the three phases we just talked about. So for a squat, from our example, the first two would be a 2-second eccentric or lowering phase. So that's a 1,000, 2, 1,000 in the squat. So rather than just quick down and up, I'm intentionally going 1,000, 2,000 for the lowering phase, right? Second number, that's the change of direction for an exercise. So in the squat, that would be the bottom. So now this squat has a 2-second lowering, but also has a 2 seconds at the bottom. So that will look like a 2-second lowering, 1,000, 2,000, a 2-second pause down here, 1,000, 2,000. And then it has a 1 for the third and final phase, which is the concentric to stand up. 1 second coming out of the bottom of your squat is pretty much just standing up, 1,000 forcefully, right? So you can see here, this is another example. So a 1 second, nice and controlled lower, still a 2-second pause at the bottom, and then a 1 second on the way up. It's important to note, different exercises will load the body differently, but each exercise will have these phases. All right, so let's talk about why tempo is important and kind of a little bit more about how it benefits you and why you should focus on it. Even without a specific tempo prescription, when you're exercising, you should be very mindful of the speed at which you're moving anyways, right? We don't want to rush exercises because we don't get as much out of them, right? So the reason utilizing tempo is important is it helps us to be mindful. So that's more than just kind of like an abstract, like, oh, I'm being intentional to work out or do this exercise. We actually want to slow down how long each rep takes so that we have more time to be exposed to that exercise or to the weight or to the movement. So because the brain is so involved in exercise, connecting to the muscles and making sure we're moving correctly and recruiting all the important muscle fibers involved, it pays a lot for developing your skill to be mindful of your tempo, right? It also makes things harder. So when we use a slower tempo or we add a pause somewhere, we draw out the length of that set. And the longer that set is going on, you felt this, the more it's going to burn, the more it's going to hurt. So that it makes our exercises harder. This results in an increase in intensity, which is great. You can use tempo and manipulate tempo to make an exercise much more challenging than it would be if you just sped through your repetitions. All right, and last, it's effective, and this leads to progress. So especially if you're a newer lifter or you're new to this or you're doing new exercises maybe you haven't done before, utilizing tempo, especially on the lowering portion of your reps, so a slow and controlled lowering maybe an intentional pause at the bottom followed by a forceful contraction, right? We want to contract the muscle intentionally and forcefully, but it does pay a lot of dividends to slow down when they're lengthening and stretching. So slowing down on the way down your squat, or slowing down a little bit on your bench press, lowering, and then powerfully press up, right? So that makes it effective for learning the skill of the exercises. It's better for teaching your brain. It's better for recruiting more muscle fibers, which is the goal. We need to recruit them, use them, tear them down so they will rebuild. And that can all be done by mindfully manipulating and controlling the weights, right? This simply put means that you need to move the weights and the weights don't need to move you, right? You should feel like you're in control of those weights, and that's what manipulating your tempo is all about. It's developing more control over your body while you're doing exercise and better loading and stimulating growth. So strength and muscle gains will come with a more intentional tempo. So I hope this is useful. When you see these numbers for your exercises, if any of this doesn't make sense or you have questions, just shoot us a message. But the main takeaway here is bring a little bit more intentionality and be deliberate to the tempo of your exercises. And there's never anything wrong with a slow lowering of an exercise, right? Followed by a powerful contraction. So slow lowering is good, and then drive up forcefully. That is a great way to recruit the muscles that you want and be a little bit more efficient in your workout. So I hope this tempo video helps.